listening to Speaking with One Voice with Rodney Payne. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, topics you'd like discussed on the show, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email us at rpayne@onevoiceinc.org. That's rpayne@onevoiceinc.org. You can also search for us on Acast, Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Just look for Speaking with One Voice. Now, here's your host, Rodney Payne.
Hello and welcome to Speaking with One Voice. I am your host, the coach, Rodney Payne, back this week for another episode of Speaking with One Voice, your leadership podcast where we love to add value to you and your team. We want to thank you so much for being on this journey with us. I'd like to ask you to do me a favor. Make sure that you are following us on all of our social media platforms at Rodney R. Payne. Not only that, make sure that if you would subscribe, we like ratings. We want you to like us, and also turn your notifications on. And we really, really want you to check out the new versions of our podcasts that are now also hosted on YouTube at Rodney R. Payne. Go sign up there, go subscribe, and get connected with us where you can be a part of our leadership podcast each and every week where we can add value to you. Listen, I am so excited about being with you today. And this week, I've got a very exciting topic I want to dig into. And so do this, get you a pad, get your note taking out. And so you can get kind of into this thing. And I want to talk to you about a process that I believe is key. It's critical for us as leaders to get this right. And so today I want to talk to you about making decisions under uncertainty. Making decisions under uncertainty. So when you think about making decisions, every leader faces decisions all the time. And you know that we really try to deal with this topic because I believe that great leaders are great decision makers. And you can become a great decision maker. Think about it. Decision making can be challenging. Why? Because sometimes you have to rely on your gut. Well, if your gut is right, then that's great. But if it's not, well, we end up in bad places. Sometimes we get it right and we celebrate a great decision, a great win, and we're really excited about that. Well, other times we get it wrong. We miss it. We don't make the right decision. How do we get to a place where we can make decisions, not just decisions, but great decisions when things are really unstable, when things are uncertain, when things are unsure, when our facts are sketchy and things are moving around? How do we get to a place where we make great decisions? Well, today, as we talk about this, I want to give you a few things that are going to help you to become a better decision maker today. That's right. You can become a better decision maker right now. Step one is, if you're going to be a great decision maker and you've got times of instability and uncertainty, you've got to learn how to define your risk tolerance. What is your tolerance? When things get dicey and it gets difficult to make a decision, where are you on the risk meter? How are you in making decisions that require you to step out there beyond the norm when you have no concrete situation that there's a clear-cut best decision? Well, let's talk about this risk tolerance, because if you understand your risk tolerance, you can position yourself to make better decisions. Risk tolerance is personal and organizational. So there's a way that I am as far as it goes with taking risk. And organizationally, I typically get a bit more conservative than I am on a personal level. So how you are as a leader will determine kind of what that organization looks like as far as risk. So when you talk about risk is really determining how much exposure to chance of injury or loss are you willing to take. Yes. If you put yourself out there, put your team out there, put your organization out there, how much are you willing to lose? See, what happens is when we limit our losses, we can also limit our wins. So we have to be really careful, because there's a certain amount of risk that you have to be willing to take as a leader. Leaders who won't take risk are typically leaders who don't grow, who don't experience a high level of success. But it's not just throw a dart at the dartboard and figure out what your risk tolerance is, because your risk tolerance, it has to be defined and it has to be consistent. See, when you're consistent in your risk tolerance, what happens is you can better dictate and predict how to make better decisions that you're more comfortable with. Because if you're making risks that you're uncomfortable with and you lose, then it hits your confidence. And there's so many things that go with that. So I want you to really look at your risk tolerance and look at how do you make this thing consistent. How do you work through this thing so that you fully understand what works for you? The way you do it is you've got to get some measurables. You've got to get some things that define what risk looks like to you, and how you feel comfortable here or there. What is the exposure you're willing to take? And it has to be undergirded with reason. When you don't have reason behind your model, there can be no consistency. So you want to put some measurables, some parameters in place. You want to reason them out based on what it looks like. So there are certain things that are in my no-fly zone. One of the things you'll find out if you'll get you a copy of my most recent leadership book, Critical Decisions Made Easy, you'll find that I am big on guiding principles. In brief, it just establishes my true north. And what my true north is dictates what I will or will not do, or what fits within my risk palette, because I've taken time to define this. So our risk tolerance has to be personal. It doesn't have to be the same as everyone else's, but within my person or my organization, it must be consistent. And when it comes to risk tolerance, we must also communicate that clearly. There's a reason that you feel this way. Perhaps you've been in business before. There is a statistic out there. I don't have it ready for you, but basically, most millionaires, or a certain percentage of millionaires, have filed bankruptcy a certain number of times. Why? Based on their risk tolerance, they were willing to risk it all to get that next level. Now, at some point, it works out for them, perhaps, and at some point, it doesn't. We don't hear all the stories. But if you don't clearly communicate to your team within your organization why we do things the way we do them, or what our risk tolerance is, then it's hard to get buy-in. I worked in the financial industry for many, many years. And we had what we would our risk tolerance. There was a certain way that we wanted to be viewed within the community. So there was certain business based on the risk assessment that we were unwilling to do. Now, the risk assessment didn't have anything to do with profitability. Oftentimes, those businesses made great money, but there's a certain amount of risk associated with doing business with that type or those types of businesses. So, as an institution, we steered away from those. See, you have to have something more substantial and consistent than your gut or what you feel if you're going to make decisions under uncertainty. So the first point here is we want to deal with this risk tolerance. It's personal, it's organizational. Risk tolerance must be consistent, and risk tolerance must be clearly communicated. So I want us thinking about that. What is your risk tolerance? If I had to tell you, 0 is you are extremely conservative, whereas 10 is you bet, let it ride, bet it all. What is your tolerance there, and why do you feel that way? How do you define that? What fits into that? Write that down and identify your risk tolerance, because that's going to help you to become a better decision maker in very, very short order. Now, not only do you have to deal with this, defining your level of risk that you're comfortable with, you also have to develop a framework to mitigate that risk. So once I define it, now how do I navigate it? How do I put myself in the right position? How do I mitigate, neutralize the risk so that it doesn't take all of my business at one time, so that I don't lose everything? How do I get to a place where I can take the right amount of risk and get the right amount of rewards, where I'm comfortable, where I can have a growing business model? But how do I get there? Well, when we deal with our framework, the framework that we build in order to help us better make these decisions that are driven by our risk tolerance, we have to develop a framework. And this framework must address our exposure. See, when it's just you as an individual entrepreneur, you can bet the house on the house, and you can lose the house and no one's impacted but you. But when you have a team, when you have a family, there are others counting on you to make the right decisions. You have to decide what level of risk you're willing to take, and that's be a part of it. So how much exposure are we willing to put ourselves out there? I have some very specific parameters that I run my business within and my family as far as risk. I am risk also kind of go with age. When you're younger, listen, it's no big deal. Live and let live. Have a good life. Go let it ride. All right. The older you get, the more conservative you get. My investment portfolio was shaped completely differently in my 20s than it is at the phase of life I am now. So you have to determine how much exposure. That was the beginning of the exercise we started in the last thought, is that I wanted you to begin to write down, are you a 0? Are you a 10? Are you a 3? Are you a 7? Are you a 4? Are you a 6? Where are you on this risk meter? And what that's doing is, now that if I decide I'm a 7, then what makes that 30% risk, that I'm exposure that I have there? How do I deal with that? And so when you want to develop a framework, your framework must not only consider your exposure, but it has to consider outcomes. If we don't win, if we lose here, what does that do to our organization? Can we absorb such a loss? Does it set us back? Does it close our doors? See, sometimes as young entrepreneurs or inexperienced entrepreneurs, we put ourselves in bad positions and we lose our businesses, not because we don't have a good product, not because we're not good at what we do, but we didn't effectively consider the outcomes that go with what we're doing. And as a result, we overexposed ourselves. So we have to make sure that we build a framework that considers outcomes. What am I looking to accomplish? Where am I looking to get to? What is my ultimate goal? One of the things you'll often hear me say, and I work with my clients on this quite a bit, is what is your desired outcome? Determine your desired outcome first, and then back into how you get there. That's where you develop your strategy. So when we're making decisions under uncertainty, we want to be good at it. We want to be consistent. So how do we get there? Well, we build a framework that addresses our exposure. How do I deal with this 30% exposure if I'm a 7? How do I deal with this 20%? The higher I get, the worse it gets, right? If I'll bet 70% on it and I'll lose that, can I live on the 30% that's left? We have to be really, really clear on what we're doing here. And so our framework has to address exposure, it has to address outcomes, and it also has to promote healthy growth. Let me tell you this, you've heard the saying, no risk, no reward. Big risk, big reward. Little risk, little reward. It works both ways. But if you are not willing to risk anything, you can't grow a business. You simply can't lead a team to the next level. You've got to be willing to do everything you can to mitigate your risk, but you've got to take some steps out there. You've got to take some leaps, and they can be founded on your facts, your data, your research, your studies. But at some point, you are going to have to go somewhere where you are uncomfortable. Risk is an uncomfortable process, but if you want to win, you're going to have to take some risk, but they can be healthy growth. They can promote healthy growth because you have limited your exposure. You've considered your outcomes, and you've made a decision based on facts, not feelings, not based on emotion, not based on your gut, but you have gone through a process of vetting this and working through it so that you can get where you want to be. I'm trying to tell you that you can be a great decision maker. Not everything will always line up, but there are things that you can do to neutralize the negative impacts of bad decisions or poor risk that you've taken, because you can decide before you make the decision, how much exposure can we absorb? What is our real desired outcome? Is this the big break we need, the big step that we can take? Is this the thing that will help us to grow in a healthy manner? It can't be feast or famine, all or nothing. We've got to make some decisions, because if we don't take that chance, we won't get there. You've heard the saying, you miss 100% of the shots that you won't take. You have got to decide that I'm going to be an effective decision maker, and I'm going to understand me. I'm going to understand my team. We're going to understand and articulate our risk tolerance. And then we're going to consider our exposure. We're going to consider our outcomes, and we're going to promote healthy growth. We're going to take the right chances. I love sports, so I often use sports analogies. But when watching various games, I watch the strategies of the coaching staffs, and they don't take risk or take big shots all the time. They set them up. They're calculated. They pick the right timing because they considered all the components to go into it. They don't hit every big shot they take, but they can't afford to take a shot here or there. And what happens is, people that have calculated the risk, and take the shot. They'll hit enough of those shots to win the game. That's healthy growth. Listen, you are listening to Speaking with One Voice. I am your host, the Coach Rodney Payne. We are here each and every week to bring you new content to add value to you and or your leadership team. Are you interested in how we can help you? Simply DM us, simply message us on the app that you're listening to here. And guess what? We'll get right back with you and we'll talk about how we can help you and or your team get to the next level. If you'd like to learn more about decision making, pick up a copy of my book, Critical Decisions Made Easy. You can pick it up at rodneyrpayne.com or you can grab it on Amazon. Love to have you get this in your hands. It will be a great tool to help you. Let's continue as we continue talking about decisions under uncertainty. So the last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about implementing a decision-making system. So everything we've talked about to this point is about a system. See, the importance of staying open and to risk and taking the proper risk and the assessments and all we've talked about. The key here is that if we have a system, now we can put the system in place. And when we put the system in place, it helps us to produce output for our decision making. We've considered our risk tolerance. We've considered our guiding principles. We've considered what we want to do. So now let's look at this thing. So when we think about implementing a decision-making system, that will empower us to make decisions under uncertainty that we can be comfortable with. So understand this, systems consider a whole lot more than just your risk tolerance. But if you get the risk tolerance where you understand it and you have made a decision, it makes decisions for you automatically. If something falls outside of your scope of your tolerance, then we simply just do not make that risk. There are certain things in my business that are, if it's morally improper, it's outside of my comfort zone. That's a risk I'm not willing to take for any amount of profit. So when I'm posed with a decision or an opportunity that's going to cost me some credibility collateral, it's going to cost me some moral collateral, it's not going to cost me because that's beyond the risk I'm willing to take. Now, will I take a chance and make an investment and hope that it pays off based on my research? Absolutely. But if it's morally improper, that's not what I want my brand to stand for. That's not who we are. So guess what? I've given myself back a lot of time because I no longer have to consider what I consider outside of my scope. I just don't do it. Why have I done that? Well, when you decide what you will do and what you will not do before you're faced with it, then all you have to do is kind of stick to your decision, so to speak. But if you're open for anything and you weight each decision independently, and no matter what, you go through that process, some are going to push you into places of uncomfort. Some are going to get you out of alignment where you don't want to be. But when you know what your business stands for, you know what your brand identity is, and you know that's beyond you, it's simple as that. I mean, you all know that we've got businesses that decide we will not open on a certain day of the week. Many businesses choose Sundays and Mondays to close for whatever reason in their industry. Once they make that decision, there's no worries. They simply abide by the decision that they have made. So what we have to understand is that when you make a decision up front to build a system, you're saying that I'm giving myself some guardrails. I'm giving myself some alignment here that I'm not going to go beyond this. And when you do that, that will help you make decisions. Now, let me just give you a quick caveat here. You can change over time. What's good for today may not be good for tomorrow. There are risks you'll be able to take in the future that you simply can't afford to take today. So make sure that you understand it's more than risk tolerance. It's about a system. And what systems do for you is they create consistency. They're simply just a way that you go about it. I tell people all the time, never make a critical decision when you're emotional, no matter how the circumstances are in favor of that decision at that moment. When you are emotional, you are not in the best place to make the best decision. So you have a system. My system says, don't make a decision immediately. Don't make a decision right now on the spot, especially if you're emotional. You make decisions that you regret when you make them when you're emotional. So that gives me consistency. Now, when I have consistency, I'm better able to know and have a more predictable outcome because I use the same method to get to the process. It doesn't always produce the same outcome, but there are some things that were disqualified early because they were outside of my guiding principles. Other things made it through the process because they fit, but they were uncomfortable, but they stretched me. Well, we did some research that covered the stretch, and so now we feel better. So guess what happens? When you build a decision-making system and you implement it, you're going to ultimately create consistency that leads to, guess what? Confidence. How would your world change if you had these decisions under uncertainty that you have to make, but you had consistency in how you do it and confidence that what you're doing is working? Wouldn't it make those decisions much easier to make? Wouldn't it help you get from where you are? Wouldn't it help you get to the next level? Listen, building a system may not be the easiest thing or the most convenient thing, but it is very productive and will give you the edge when it comes to making decisions, particularly under uncertainty. Everyone can make a no-brainer decision because that's the easy thing to do. What separates good leaders from great leaders is the ability to make a decision under uncertainty that comes out right and puts you and your organization in the winner's circle. That's where we're trying to get you to. Listen, that's all of my time today. I'm so glad you stopped by and you listened. Do me a favor, make sure that you're following us on all of our social media platforms at Rodney R. Payne. Don't forget, I want you to for sure go to YouTube and like us there at Rodney R. Payne. And I want you to subscribe. I want you to subscribe and turn your notifications on so that you're notified when we have new content. And as always, if we can help you in any way, feel free. RodneyRPayne.com is how you find us, or on any of the or on the platform you're listening to right now. You can find us on those spaces. Be sure to message us, reach out to us. We'd love to add value to you and or your organization to help you to get from where you are to where you want to be. Listen, I am your host, the coach, Rodney Payne. Thank you for listening to Speaking with One Voice. And until next time, let's keep growing together.
You've been listening to Speaking with One Voice. Please remember to follow Rodney Payne on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Rodney R. Payne. We'd love to hear from you and get your feedback, so please feel free to leave us comments. And if you would, rate and subscribe to the podcast, we'd appreciate that as well. Don't forget to set up for notifications so you can get the latest updates and social media posts and get new podcasts when they're released. As always, use the hashtag Speaking with One Voice or simply SWOV on any of your social media posts. On behalf of Rodney